I sat across from a guy at a steak dinner about 4 years ago who changed how I think about money forever. Not because of what he said, because of what I noticed. His name was Trent, friend of a friend, the kind of person who ends up at your table because someone brought someone, and suddenly you're sharing appetizers with a stranger. It happens, especially in Chicago, where every dinner seems to grow by two people between the reservation and the actual sitting down. Trent was, and I'm choosing this word carefully, impressive. His watch was the first thing I noticed. I don't know watches well enough to name it, but I know enough to know it cost more than my first car. His suit fit like it had been built on his body. His shoes had that shine that only exists on leather that's never been rained on. When he ordered, he didn't look at the menu. He just told the waiter what he wanted, by name, like he'd been eating at this restaurant his entire life. Everything about Trent said, "I have made it," and I believed it. Completely, without question, for about 2 hours. Then something small happened that I almost missed. The check came. It was a group dinner, maybe 8 people. Someone suggested splitting it evenly. Trent agreed immediately, casually, like it didn't matter. But when the card went down, I saw him glance at his phone under the table, just for a second. The way you check something when you're not sure the number is going to work. It was fast. Nobody else caught it. But I caught it because I used to do the same thing. That glance, that half-second check under the table, told me more about Trent's finances than 2 hours of performance ever could. Because I recognized it. That specific micro-anxiety of someone who's not sure the card will clear. That momentary calculation, how much is my share, what's already pending, is there enough room? Done in a fraction of a second, hidden beneath a table, behind a face that's projecting absolute confidence. I knew that glance because I'd lived inside that glance for years. Now, I don't know Trent's actual numbers. I never will. We weren't close enough for that conversation. But I've thought about him a lot since that night. Not about him specifically, but about what he represents. Because Trent isn't rare. Trent is everywhere. Let me ask you something, and I want you to really think about this before you answer. How many people in your life do you think are performing wealth they don't actually have? Not lying exactly, not scamming, just performing, curating an external version of their financial life that doesn't match the internal reality. Driving the car, wearing the watch, ordering the dinner, posting the vacation, while somewhere underneath all of it, a phone gets checked under a table. Because the data says it's not a few people. It's nearly half. Americans now carry $1.28 trillion in credit card debt. The average household has over $100,000 in total debt. And yet, luxury car sales keep climbing. Designer brand revenue keeps growing. The gap between what people actually have and what they're willing to spend to look like they have it has never been wider. Something doesn't add up. Unless you understand that for a huge number of people, the money isn't buying the thing. The money is buying the performance. I want to tell you about 2 people I know, actually know, not friend of a friend, because I think the contrast will do more than any statistic I could throw at you. The first is someone I'll call Victoria. Victoria works in pharmaceutical sales, makes about $115,000 a year. Good money, real money. And Victoria looks like she makes $115,000 a year. Actually, Victoria looks like she makes about $250,000 a year. She drives a leased BMW 3 Series, the base model, but nobody driving past her on the highway knows it's the base model. They just see the badge. She wears designer pieces, not head to toe. She's too smart for that, but strategic pieces. The bag, the sunglasses, the shoes that you'd only recognize if you're the kind of person who notices shoes. which is exactly the kind of person she's dressing for. Her apartment is in the right building. Her Instagram is curated with the precision of a magazine editorial. Brunch spots, rooftop bars, weekend trips that photograph beautifully. From the outside, Victoria is living her best life. I found out, not because she told me, but because we were close enough at one point that numbers slipped out sideways. Victoria has about $8,000 in savings at 36, and she has roughly $22,000 in credit card debt spread across 3 cards. The bag she carries costs $1,200. Her savings account wouldn't cover it. She is, by every financial definition that matters, broke. But she doesn't look broke. She looks like the opposite of broke. She looks like someone you'd ask for financial advice. Now let me tell you about Paul. Paul is a high school shop teacher, makes about $62,000. He drives a 2015 Toyota Camry that he bought used, in cash. He wears clothes from Target and Costco. The nicest thing on his wrist is a Casio digital watch that his daughter gave him for Father's Day, and he loves that watch more than most people love anything they own. Paul's house is a 3-bedroom in a neighborhood that doesn't trend on real estate TikTok. His idea of a good Friday night is grilling something in the backyard and watching a game. Nobody looks at Paul and thinks wealthy. Paul has $780,000 in retirement accounts. At 51, he'll cross $1 million before he's 55. His house is paid off. He has 0 debt of any kind. 0. He's on track to retire at 58 with more financial freedom than Victoria will have at 70 if she doesn't change something fundamental about how she relates to money. Same city. Victoria earns almost double what Paul earns. Paul has nearly 100 times Victoria's savings. 100 times on a shop teacher's salary. And here's the thing that really twists my brain. If Victoria and Paul were standing next to each other at a party, every person in the room would assume Victoria is the financially successful one. Every single person. Because we've been programmed to read wealth through a very specific visual language. Cars, clothes, accessories, neighborhoods. And Victoria speaks that language fluently. Paul doesn't speak it at all. Paul doesn't even know the language exists. And that's exactly why he's rich. I've been thinking a lot about why this happens. Not just the mechanics. We've covered the mechanics in other videos. The hedonic treadmill, lifestyle inflation, the spending identity that scales with income. We know how it works. What I want to understand is why it feels so necessary. Why does Victoria, who is smart, educated, successful by any reasonable measure, feel compelled to perform a version of wealth that's actively destroying her actual financial life? And I think the answer is something we don't talk about enough. She's afraid. Not afraid of being poor, afraid of being seen as poor. There's a difference, a huge one. And that difference is where most of the financial destruction in America actually happens. Being poor is a material condition. It's math. It has solutions. Earn more, spend less, build margin. The math is fixable. Being seen as poor is a social condition. It's identity. It's the terror of someone looking at you and making a judgment about your worth based on what you drive, what you wear, what your apartment looks like. And that terror doesn't respond to math. It responds to psychology, to childhood, to every message you've ever absorbed about what success is supposed to look like. Victoria grew up in a family where money was tight. Not desperate, but tight. She remembers being the kid whose clothes came from the wrong stores. She remembers a birthday party where a classmate made a comment about her shoes. She doesn't remember the exact words. She doesn't need to. She remembers the feeling. And somewhere between that birthday party and her first paycheck, she made a decision, probably not consciously, probably not in words, that she would never be that kid again, that she would look successful no matter what it cost, that nobody would ever look at her and think less. Every designer bag, every leased BMW, every curated Instagram post, they're not purchases. They're armor. And I say this with zero judgment because my armor looked different but served the same purpose. The tag higher, the Lincoln Park apartment, the lease I couldn't really afford. All of it was protection against the same fear, the fear of being seen as less than. Sound familiar? Here's what the research says, and it's both obvious and devastating. The people who actually build wealth behave nothing like the people who appear wealthy. Thomas Stanley studied millionaires for decades. His findings are consistent and brutal. 80% of millionaires are first generation. They built it themselves. Half have lived in the same house for over 20 years. They drive Toyotas and Hondas and Fords. The median price they pay for a car is $31,000. Meanwhile, 8% of people earning under $100,000 drive luxury vehicles. They're spending $60,000 on a car while making $50,000 a year. Read those numbers again. 8% of people who can't afford luxury cars are driving luxury cars, and the actual millionaires are driving Camrys. One group looks wealthy, the other group is wealthy. These are almost never the same people. I want to talk about something specific here because I think it's the mechanism that does the most damage, and nobody treats it as the financial weapon it actually is. Leasing. Victoria leases her BMW, $580 a month, 3-year term. When the lease ends, she'll hand the car back and start a new lease on the next model. She's been doing this for about 8 years. Let me do the math on that because the math is where the performance collapses. In 8 years, Victoria has paid approximately $55,000 in lease payments. She owns nothing. Zero equity. The moment each lease ended, the car went back, and every dollar she'd paid vanished into depreciation she'll never recover. If she'd bought a reliable used car for $20, threw in cash, like Paul's Camry, and invested the difference, roughly $400 a month at 7% returns over those 8 years, she'd have about $53,000 in investments. Instead, she has a monthly payment and a car she has to give back in 10 months. $53,000. That's the current price of Victoria's need to have a BMW badge visible in the parking lot. Not the price of transportation, the price of the badge. Now run that forward 20 years, 30 years, over a career of perpetual leasing versus buying, used and investing the difference. The gap isn't tens of thousands, it's hundreds of thousands. It might be the difference between retiring and not retiring. All for a logo on a hood that strangers glance at for half a second at a stoplight. Now, I need to be careful here because there's a version of this conversation that turns into shaming, and that's not what I'm doing. I've made every one of these mistakes. I am not standing above anyone. Victoria isn't stupid. Victoria isn't vain. Victoria is a human being operating inside a system that has been deliberately, precisely, expensively engineered to make her feel like her worth is measured by her visible consumption. Every ad she sees, every influencer in her feed, every movie and show and billboard and magazine spread, all of it delivering the same message in 1,000 different costumes. You are what you display. Your value is your visibility. If they can't see it, it doesn't count. That message started when she was a child. It was reinforced every single day for 36 years. And then we act surprised when she leases a BMW she can't afford. The surprise isn't that people perform wealth. The surprise is that anyone manages not to. Let me talk about what the performance actually costs beyond the money, because I think the financial cost is almost the least of it. There's a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from maintaining an image that doesn't match your reality. I know because I've felt it. And I've watched Victoria feel it, even though she'd never describe it that way. It's the exhaustion of always being on, of scanning every room to make sure your outfit is calibrated correctly, of taking 20 photos at brunch to get the one that looks effortless, of saying yes to dinners you can't afford because saying no might reveal that the performance isn't real. It's the exhaustion of lying, not big lies, small ones, constant ones. Oh, this? I got it on sale. Yeah, the apartment's great, totally worth it. I'm doing really well, actually. Small performances that stack up until the distance between who you are and who you're presenting becomes so wide that you can feel it in your chest at 2 a.m. Victoria once told me, and I don't think she realized how much she was revealing. She said, I feel like I can't stop now. Like if I downgraded anything, people would notice. People would think something went wrong. People would think something went wrong. Not, something would go wrong. People would think it. The fear isn't financial, it's social. And the social fear is so much more powerful than the financial math that all the spreadsheets in the world can't compete with it. That's why I don't think the answer to this is more financial education. Victoria understands compound interest. She knows what an index fund is. She knows, intellectually, abstractly, that she should be saving more and spending less. The answer is something harder, something that no YouTube video can fully deliver, but that I can at least point at. The answer is asking yourself a question that feels simple, but might be the most difficult question in personal finance. Who am I performing for? When you buy the thing you can't quite afford, who is it for? When you choose the brand over the function, who sees it? When you upgrade the car, the apartment, the wardrobe, who are you trying to convince? And what exactly are you trying to convince them of? Because here's what I found when I finally asked myself those questions honestly. The audience I was performing for wasn't my friends. My real friends didn't care what I drove. They cared whether I showed up. It wasn't my family. My family wanted me to be okay, not to look okay. It wasn't even really strangers. Strangers don't think about you. That's the hardest truth and the most freeing one. Strangers are too busy worrying about their own performance to evaluate yours. The audience was me. I was performing for myself, trying to convince myself that I'd made it, that I was enough, that the kid who felt like he was falling behind had finally caught up, and every purchase that was supposed to prove it just made me need more proof. Paul, the shop teacher, with $780,000, he never needed that proof. Not because he's more disciplined, not because he's wired differently. He just somehow escaped the programming that tells you your car is your character and your clothes are your credentials. I asked him once, genuinely curious, if he ever felt pressure to upgrade, to look more successful, to match what other people his age were driving and wearing and living in. He looked at me like I'd asked the strangest question he'd ever heard. Then he said, and I love this, he said, Marcus, I teach 16-year-olds how to build bookshelves. Who exactly am I supposed to impress? Who exactly am I supposed to impress? And the answer, for Paul, was genuinely nobody, not in a defeated way, not in an I've given up way, in a liberated way. He'd looked at the performance and decided it wasn't a show he wanted to be in, and by not performing, he kept every dollar that Victoria's was spending on costumes. I want to leave you with something that happened about a month after that steak dinner with Trent. I was at a different event, smaller, more casual, and I found myself standing next to a woman who was dressed so ordinarily that I almost didn't talk to her. Jeans, sweater, the kind of shoes you forget immediately after seeing them. We got to talking. She was retired, 61, former pediatrician. Spent 30 years treating kids in underserved communities. At some point, I asked what she was doing in retirement. She smiled and said she was funding a clinic in her old neighborhood, out of pocket. She'd been planning it for 15 years, out of pocket. A clinic for 15 years of planning. I don't know her net worth. She didn't say and I didn't ask. But I know it was significant. And I know that nothing about her appearance, nothing, not a single item, hinted at it. She wasn't hiding it. She wasn't playing stealth wealth games. She just didn't think about it. The money was a tool. It built a clinic. It didn't build an image. I thought about Trent, the watch, the suit, the phone check under the table, and I thought about this woman, the jeans, the sweater, the clinic, same species, same economy, completely different relationship with the same resource. One of them was performing wealth. The other one was using it. Here's the last thing. I can't tell you to stop caring what people think. That's not how brains work. The social comparison instinct is millions of years old. It kept our ancestors alive. You can't just turn it off because a guy on YouTube told you to. But I can tell you this. Every time you make a purchase that's designed to change how someone else sees you, rather than how you actually live, you are paying a tax, a voluntary, unnecessary, compounding tax on your own future. The $200 bag isn't a bag. It's a statement, and statements have ongoing costs. The leased BMW isn't transportation. It's a performance, and performances require constant funding. The curated Instagram isn't a memory. It's a campaign, and campaigns have budgets that never end. Every dollar you spend on how things look is a dollar that can't work on how things are. And how things are is the only scoreboard that matters when the performance ends. And the performance always ends. At retirement, at an emergency, at 2 a.m. when nobody's watching and it's just you and the number in your account and the question of whether you built something real or just something visible. Victoria's bag costs $200 and holds a wallet with maxed out credit cards. Paul's Casio costs $30 and was given to him by someone who loves him regardless of what he wears. One of those is wealth. The other is a very expensive costume that gets heavier every month. Real wealth whispers. Fake wealth is the only one that needs you to hear it. If this one hit somewhere that made you uncomfortable, good. That discomfort is the space between who you've been performing as and who you actually want to be. Share it with someone who's exhausted from the performance, but doesn't know how to stop. Not to shame them, to free them, because the exit is simpler than they think. You just stop clapping for a show that was never for you. Next one's coming. We're not done yet.